Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Joe MacDonald, and this is going to be my second time tonight doing this little webinar. I realized when I'd done the live presentation, it didn't properly record. So we will be here doing another recording for you all. And I hope everyone tuning in, you're having a great evening, morning, whenever you're tuning in. And I hope to answer any of your questions you might have regarding the upcoming 49th Battalion Battlefield Tour. I just want to make it clear that if you have any further questions and I don't cover something, you're more than welcome to reach out either by phone or by email. I'm virtually always available, and so just don't hesitate to reach out. As far as introductions go, I serve as the regimental historian for the Loyal Edmonton Regiment, but really my interest pertains to the 49th Battalion. The tour which we're trying to organize here, it's actually been a personal dream of mine for several years now. And we'll get into it in the presentation, but at the base of it, we're trying to bring together families that have not been together in about 100 years, back on the actual battlegrounds that are so important to us, not only as Canadians, but as the families of 49ers. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're also going to try and commemorate the sacrifices and the bravery of each and every one of those men that served, and there were over 4,000, and in that number are many of your relatives, which is simply phenomenal. So anyway, thank you for tuning in tonight, and I hope what I'm going to share with you is informative and of interest. And once again, any questions at all, there's no dumb questions. Just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer. So we'll give this a go, and hopefully it works. So what you should be able to see now, you should be able to see the slideshow. And so there's just a little typo here, and I still haven't changed it. It's the Western Front Tour for August of 2026, sorry. And so it's coming up next year. It's going to be 10 days and 9 nights. And once again, as you can see right here, retracing the steps of the 49ers that were there. You can see in the background here, this is the Vimy Memorial, and it'll be one of the places that we're going to visit. So along with visiting the nitty-gritty parts of the battlefield, we're also hitting the top and must-see locations, so that what you'll walk away with is a very comprehensive tour, not only of the 49ers, but also as the Canadians and the Western Front as a whole. You'll get a lot out of it. So just to proceed forward, bear with me for a moment here. So you can see what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to get a true pilgrimage going. In 1936, thousands of Canadians during the Great Depression, veterans of the First World War, transcended upon Vimy Ridge and the battlefields in northern France and Belgium to commemorate and remember the battles of 1914 to 1918, and especially Canada's contribution. About two or three dozen 49ers partook in that celebration. They're pictured somewhere down here. What we're trying to do is this, but the 21st century version. No time in the history of the regiment since 1936 have so many families of 49ers come out for this event. And of course, the 49ers themselves, that generation, they're passed away. But what I'm hoping to portray here is they're a lot closer than you might think. And the bravery and the actions and the deeds that your relatives did on those battlefields, which for many of us are more than 7,000 kilometers away, they still live on, and we can still uncover them and unpack them. And you can realize just how significant of a role your relative played, not only in the history of perhaps your family, but in the history of Canada. And I think the realities of it all will be quite surprising. And you might uncover that they fought in places such as Vimy, Ashendale, or St. Sherwood, and just understanding what these actually meant for 49ers. So to break this down to what we're really trying to do, and I think in essence here, it's simple. It's your heritage and it's their war. So for them, they were all volunteers virtually, at least most of them by war's end. There were a few conscripts that ended up. But these are men who wanted to be there. These are men who volunteered, who went through training, and they never took a step back. There are many Canadian battalions in the First World War which had problems with desertion, which had problems with self-inflicted wounds, and so on and so forth. But the difference here with the 49ers is not one of them ever took a step back. They were always facing the enemy, and they were always going into action. They were some of the bravest guys that one could ever know. And now, unfortunately, they're all gone. It's a late generation. But we're trying to bring it back. And this is your heritage here. And so we're trying to help uncover that heritage and uncover their war and bring you to those places that meant the most for them. And so we'll break it down. So One of the principal way we're going to do this is, one, we're going to be walking their footsteps. I think the photograph you see on the left, it speaks for itself. It is kind of what we mean by walking their footsteps. On the top, you can see the same place today, and then on the bottom, it's the officers of the 49th Battalion in 1918. We'll go to there, and we'll go to other places just like that, and I'll prove to you that this is actually where the 49th Battalion were, and this is where your relative was in particular. We're going to be retracing their steps, and beyond that, we're also reliving their experiences. You know, when we go to some of these places at Vimy Ridge and the Somme and in Belgium, they might not all speak English, but they didn't speak English back then. And so if you have these kind of awkward situations with some French locals, if you're trying to buy a baguette or something like that, you know, once again, you're going to be having the same experiences they did. Or similarly, if we go out on a terrace for a little drink all together as a platoon, it's just like what they did back in the day. And so once again, we're walking their footsteps, not only literally by walking where they once did, but also having the same experiences they did. And once we get to those battlegrounds or the rear areas, we can uncover the stories, particularly to you and other relatives of 49ers that were out there, and to bring it all together. And I think that's one of the most amazing things, that we can go to a random farm field and we can piece together the battle that took place. And you're going to be there with either it's your relative who fought there or someone else's relative who fought there. And it'll bring it all together and bring it all to life. And overall, we're going to bring you off the beaten path. So when we're doing these battlefield tours, it's not the battlefield tours you can commonly find. We'll get into it a bit later on. You know, we're not so much interested in just hitting the main sites. We're interested in bringing you into their footsteps. And so that's what we're going to try and accomplish in August 2026. So the other important thing too, and building onto that 1936 Vimy unveiling memorial, we're going to do our own. When they unveiled the memorial at Vimy, that became Canada, Vimy Ridge. But in fact, when we look at our own regiment and also other regiments, Canadian regiments, there are a couple battles which are very significant but often overlooked. At Courcelette, there's 24,000 Canadians who are killed, wounded, or missing. And at Passchendaele, there's 16,000 killed, wounded, missing. For us, at each of those battle memorials at battle sites, Courcelette and Passchendaele, Victoria Crosses have been won by members of the 49th Battalion. What you can see on the left here, this is the proposed memorial for Courcelette, and we're at the final stages with the local French and Belgian mayors at acquiring the land. And we already secured funding. We're going to unveil these memorials with you all there. And so the idea is that we can't bring the veterans themselves out. Of course, once again, we're 110 years after the war. We're too late, but you guys can come. It's your heritage. It was their war, and it's going to be you guys taking that honor and bringing on that torch to share it to future generations. We want these memorials to embody not only the spirit of the 49ers, the bravery, the sacrifice of each and every one of them, but we also want these memorials to stand as lasting testaments to Canada's dedication and courage to freedom, to liberty, and also their sacrifice on the fields of Europe. We're trying to make the 49th Battalion in Canada more prominent in some of these sites that are often overlooked now, and bring them into the forefront for local French and Belgian populations as well. So simply to kind of take a step back, and that was just the tour at the macro level, if you will. I think it's important to talk about, you know, how are you actually going to relive their experiences? So I'm going to give you some concrete ways. There's three in particular. So the first one, which is quite important, is we're going to retrace their steps. You know, this tour, it's special. It's invite only, and what that means is if you're here, if you're listening to this, odds are you heard it through someone else, and you're probably related to a 49er. We are tracing through the 49th Battalion from start to finish. There are very few 49ers that went from 1915 all the way until 1919. There were a couple, but there weren't many. But that being said, if your relative, let's say, was there kind of halfway through the war, they were in there during the rebuilding period, they fought through Vimy and the Avion raid, and then they were wounded at Passchendaele. Or let's say your relative was in the 100 Days Offensive and then came home with the unit in 1919. It's no problem, because we're actually going to be hitting each and every one of these. Once again, just with the nature of the tour, we're going to have relatives of, we're going to have descendants of 49ers who were here in the early period, in the middle period, and the end of period. So every single day when we're visiting these battlefield sites, we're going to be there with families who, for them, these are really important locations. So we're going to learn their stories. They're going to share with us their stories, and we'll piece it all together. And we're going to tell the story of the 49th Battalion through the lives and stories, once again, of your relatives. So it'll be quite incredible. But all that to be said, we're not leaving a stone unturned. This is going to be a comprehensive tour, and for you, it'll be a complete tour. Oftentimes it's said that you have to come back again and again to France to really see and uncover everything. But what we're trying to do here is have the most in-depth, complex tour imaginable, and so that for you, it's really a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and it really will be, just with the nature of it. As we mentioned before, this hasn't been done since 1936, and that's 90 years ago now. So it'll be quite special. The other important aspect of it all is when we're going to these sites and trying to understand the war through their lenses, we're not going to be using official history books and things like that. In fact, what we're going to be looking at is their testimonies. We're going to be looking at their own voices, veterans who served beside your relatives in the 49th Battalion. We're going to see the war how they saw it, and that's the important thing. What you guys can see here, this photograph, this is C Company sergeants right before the Battle of Vimy Ridge. All these guys served there. In fact, each of these guys, you have Kennedy and Dodell here, they're both killed at Vimy in the same shell blast. You can also see Alf Canton here. He's only 15 when he enlists. He ends up as an officer, one of the most experienced and decorated members of the battalion. He fights at Vimy as well. And also Charles Keeler, who is also an underage soldier. And when we're going here, each Alf and Charles Keeler, they both provided excellent testimonies. Alf through a 70,000 word memoir, and Keeler through an extensive interview, which we'll listen right away. Let me just see this really quick. Sorry, guys. This call, yeah. So I'm just gonna play out this. I'm gonna play out the actual interview. There were numerous interviews which were taken of 49th Battalion veterans. Not many, and these are really rare. In fact, they're held in Ottawa today. But I've been able to capture them and kind of convey them into comprehensive stories of different battles. And so what we're going to do right now, we're going to listen to the Battle of Vimy Ridge through the voices of the 49th. So the men who were actually there in 1917. And one of the prominent voices you'll hear is young Charles Keeler, who once again, I think during the battle was only 17 or 18. So just keep that in mind. We're just going to bring this over here. I'm just going to play it right away.
Now, Vimy was just like the Somme, only more so. Yeah. You went to the height of Vimy Ridge, then you dropped down 80 to 200 feet. And it was all honeycombed like the side of a hill. That's where the Germans were. That's why we couldn't knock them out. It's impossible to knock them out. Mm-hmm. When it came to Vimy, all men were well briefed. We went back to a mining town for 6 weeks called Bruay. And we had tapes of the trenches. Now, for 6 weeks, for about 5 days a week, we went over these tapes for about 6 hours a day. And I think you could brief the lowest soldier, any private. He could tell you just where he was going. He could point to the map, or he could memorize it, and he could tell you. And we finally went up to Vimy.
They billeted us in a tunnel. I remember one fella, he was asleep on his feet, right in the middle of the passage. People were going back and forth by him, and shoving him around. He's still fast asleep. But anyhow, and we moved into our jumping off trench, and I think the 0 hour was 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, there were a couple of guns went off, then maybe half a dozen, then machine gun. And then it was just one steady roar. You couldn't hear any individual gun at all, just one steady roar.
800 guns going in such a small sphere. It was the most magnificent and terrible spectacle I've ever seen in my life.
You didn't go over in the first wave then? Oh, yes, I went over in the first wave. As soon as the barrage was to lift, they'd send over a fire shell, you see, and there'd be a splash of flame. And that we just had to follow the barrage. See, of course, there were a lot of shells for one shot, you know. I'd be leading my bunch along, and I just stopped for no reason at all, and the shell would land right in front of me.
We were trying to keep under cover as much as possible because the shells were coming up pretty thick. And I was around the room supporting the Princess Bats, too. And there was quite a bunch of Germans laying around, you know. Some of them were dead, some of them were wounded. And I noticed some of our fellows, you know, I'd hear a shot and I'd see this guy drop. And I went down. And here I see a big German, he's playing possum. And he's picking these wounded dogs. He's picking these boys off. I was carrying a Colt 45. I had a full clip on this Colt, and I run up to the bugger and I give him a kick. And I just empty my clip right in his guts. I emptied the clip right in his belly.
There was some fighting. There were still a few hadn't gotten out of their dugouts, but they were quite willing to when we got up there.
And Corporal Riley and another sergeant went into a dugout, into a German dugout, and a brigadier was shaving himself, Brigadier General. And he asked them what they were doing there, and they told him to capture the ridge. He says, impossible, he says. There isn't a battalion, he says, there isn't an army in the world can capture Vimy Ridge. Now that was a battle well thought out and well fought. And I was then going to say to you, everybody enjoyed themselves, but
comparatively they did.
Comparatively they did, because it was such an easy victory.
The opposition at Vimy then, as far as you were concerned, was not too severe.
Oh no, there's nothing. We had very few casualties. That was my outfit. Had very few casualties going over.
We encountered nobody on it. Our casualties in our whole company, they've only amounted to 27 out of roughly approximately 160. Well, that was very light. I always said, in my term of duty in France, all the time I was there, I went in the line. I was a line soldier and into the battalion. But Vimy was a picnic, and it was the best battle we were ever in, insofar that it was least casualties. The objective was reached, and as usual, overrun by 2 miles.
So that was Vimy Ridge. Give me one moment. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it back up. Excellent. So we should see the screen again. Excellent. Okay, I think we're back. Anyway, so that's just a little segment about the Battle of Vimy Ridge, and it's interesting to actually hear the testimonies of guys who were there. And it'll be men such as Charles Keeler and Alf Canton that we're hearing time and time again. What's so shocking, I find, is that he says it was a walkover. Or often when we think of Vimy Ridge, it's the epitome of one of the costliest battles of the war. But in fact, for the 49ers, and I think it talks a lot about the bravery and fortitude that even with casualties, they were not dissuaded. Once again, they're volunteers. They're strong men, first and foremost. And I think that's what you'll discover the most when we do this tour. Just how amazing your heritage is and the stock of people you come from. You know, these are not they might have been once ordinary men, but by the time they're in France, and they're young men as well, the things they're doing, it's simply incredible. And really they're heroes. But anyway, so it's sorry for the ramble, but I think so highly of these men. Go forward here. The other thing too, which is I think quite important to implement, and this is one thing which kind of puts us in a different level from a lot of the other battlefield tours, is really this isn't a commercial thing. We're not just trying to bring you to these random places because it's close to where your relatives are. We're using modern technology to reconstruct the battlefield as it once was. On the right of your screen right now, you can probably see a little Belgian farmhouse, and you can see the Belgian farm fields. Whereas on the left, you get the juxtaposed with the aerial photography, which was taken during the Battle of Sanctuary Wood in June of 1916. This is the first baptism of fire for the 49th Battalion. The fields you can see here, just a few days before, the 49th Battalion had passed, and they come into the trench line right here. They're meant to go over the top at 2 a.m., but the other two battalions never showed up, and so it got delayed until it was broad daylight, and they advanced into the wood right here under hail of machine gun fire. It was 7 a.m. broad daylight, and they got mown down. But for 40 hours, they're going to fight on. And for many of your relatives might have served there, or for instance, if they came in after, if they were part of the 66th Battalion who joined just after that battle, well, this is where they come into for the first time. And these are all the corpses of the men who had been mown down in that charge. And so we're going to be using this modern technology to reconstruct the battlefield, understand what it looked like at the time, and also bring you to, once again, those places and tell you those stories, bring you to those footsteps. How does this look also if we talk about we're with the 49th Battalion? We're blessed. We have one of the best regimental museums in the country. So there's tons of archival material in there, many of which hasn't seen the light of day in decades. But what I've done, I've systematically gone through and I've scanned all the pieces relevant for what we're going to do, and I brought it into the modern world. And so you can see right here, this is a sketch map done by Lieutenant Toole at the time. He ended up being killed at Cambrai 2 years later, but this is what he did. He was sent with the rest of B Company into Kenora Trench, and there they held on for about 8 hours while he was in Kenora Trench, and the German Marines were trying to push him out, and he was being fired on by machine guns, according to him, from the side. He made this map, and so now we've implemented that map and we've put it over Google Earth, and now we can get you to that exact location and understand where the machine guns, where the fire was coming from, where the barbed wire was on the actual day of the battle. And so through that, we can repiece and reconstruct the battle. We can also use it post-war, after the war, when they were clearing the battlefield from not only of the unexploded shells and the barbed wire and refilling the trenches. They're also finding dozens and dozens of bodies. We've plotted out the locations of where these 49ers are, so even if you perhaps had a relative who was killed with the 49th Battalion somewhere in France, we can get you within about 10-20 yards of where that actually was and bring it all to life. It can also help us piece together the battle and understand where were the worst places of fire. If we look at Passchendaele right here, we can understand where a lot of the casualties happened. You can see this is the jumping off line, and right from here, this is where they first came under fire from the German machine guns, and you can see how heavy the casualties were. Once they got to this road, the German artillery opened up, and that's where these men fell. And then these men over here, they were trying to capture the big pillbox up here where Cecil Kinross was awarded the Victoria Cross and knocking it out. So we can piece it all together. And all that to be said, if you had a relative, once again, fought at Passchendaele, we're not bringing you to Passchendaele Village. We're bringing you to the actual spot he was. We're piecing it together, and that's what it's all about. So it's going to be an exceptional tour, and you're going to be doing it once again with families that had similar, or if not the same, experience. And you'll realize that the spirit of the 49th, a battalion that was raised 110 years ago, it still continues to this day. And so we're going to reconnect you with that amazing history, your heritage, and their war. So once again, August 22nd to 31st, 2026. That's when we're going to be walking their footsteps, and we're going to do it in a way no one's done before, and it's going to be magical. What we're going to do right now, I'm just going to go day by day, kind of what to expect. You'll find some extra information perhaps in the brochure, but this is just going to piece it together. I'm going to talk to you about the highlights. There's some stuff that might change because one of the things, and we'll get into it later, but you might also have some relatives who are perhaps buried out in France, and with in a different cemetery that's not on the tour. And so we're going to make provisions. We're going to do our best to try and incorporate that in. And so if we might have to wake up 30 minutes earlier one day just so you can see that grave, we're going to do it. Because once again, we're trying to make this a once-in-a-lifetime trip for everyone involved. And it's going to be, once again, magical. Day number one, we're going to be in Boulogne, France. Well, actually, before that, let's take a step back. that'll be our first arrival in Europe for many. We're going to be meeting at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, which is the main one in the Netherlands. And the reason for that, it's not only a main airport in the Netherlands, it's a major airport for all of Europe. In fact, all of the world. And so whether you're in Eastern Canada, in Western Canada, the United States, and the UK, for instance, we can all convene there quite easily. And once again, even if you're closer, if you're traveling throughout Europe, there's trains that go right there. From downtown Amsterdam, you're only 10 minutes away. So if you want to stay in Amsterdam the night before, that's not an issue at all. And we can make provisions to make it all work. So, but anyway, all that to be said, we're going to be meeting at Amsterdam on August 22nd. That date in particular because there's flights across from Canada which actually convene there on that day and that morning. And I think I checked for Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Toronto, and I think Montreal as well. So once again, wherever you're flying from, there should be a good way to get there. There's going to be minor stops on the route. This is going to be our big drive day, and so so we'll break it up though. And the reason for that is once we get out to Boulogne, that's now in the footsteps of the 49ers. We're going to spend our first night in France where they spent their first night in France. If you were a 49er in October 1915, you would have got to Boulogne not on a coach that we're going to do, and I'll get into it a bit later, but it'll be nice bus ride. But they would have been on getting seasick, trying to cross the channel in October of 1915. Once they arrived in Boulogne, they had heavy packs on, and they were instructed to climb this big hill. And once they got to the top of the hill, they were meant to find their billets. Well, that was the plan, but they ended up getting lost. And so they were marching around. They were dead tired by the time they finally found the billets, and they certainly weren't the ones for them, apparently. And but it didn't matter. And that was their first night in France. So we're going to be not necessarily footsteps all the way, but we're going to be staying in Boulogne and kind of seeing where that all happened. We'll have our first group meal. It'll be the group dinner where we'll get to know one another. We might have made some acquaintances already at the airport and also on the bus, perhaps. But this will be a great time just to start meeting and introducing people. And so it'll be a great opportunity because once again, your family's going to connect with families that you haven't had a connection with in more than a century, but we're going to get a close-knit group by the end of it, so it'll be great. Just to touch a little bit about on the bus we're going to do. In 2023, we did a association battlefield tour going all the way throughout Europe, from Normandy all the way to the Netherlands, covering the 49th Battalion and the Loyal Edmonton Regiment. We used an awesome bus company. It was a great bus, high quality reclining seats. There was a TV for entertainment, washrooms on board, and also refrigerators. And so there's going to be bottled water, cold water available at all times of the trip, especially because we're traveling in August. You know, it's important. We got to stay hydrated. The other thing too, which is good, we're going to have a good driver who's okay getting off the beaten path, because that's important when we're doing these battlefield tours. Once again, I don't want to be taking you guys just to cemetery, parking lot to parking lot, because it's most accessible, at least to buses. We want to be getting into the nitty gritty. So anyway, all that to be said, it'll be all handled. It'll be a good trip. And whenever we're doing those long journeys, we're going to be stopping on the way. You can see here one of the notable places we'll stop is actually where John McCrae is buried, the poet who wrote In Flanders Fields. All the way back in 1915. It's quite moving to go to that cemetery and read out the poem. He's buried right in the middle, and there's 3,000 others buried there. And the iconic poem from the First World War. John McCrae never believed in his officer status. He could have had all the nice provisions, including a warm bed and so on and so forth, being an officer, but he preferred to be with his men. And so unfortunately, he contracted pneumonia in early 1918. And passed away. And where he's buried now, Wimereux Cemetery, there's also quite a few 49ers, especially from the Battle of Vimy Ridge, who are buried there. And so one of our missions is that, and once again, because we're traveling the footsteps of these 49ers, we're going to be remembering these 49ers as well. So we'll be bringing flags and poppies, and we're going to be placing them on these graves of your relatives, fallen comrades, because they might have never had the opportunity to say goodbye. And so we're going to be kind of closing that link and showing that they're never forgotten, at least to us, and continuing that ode of remembrance that's been passed on. So that'll be our first day. So it'll be a good day. It'll be our first day. Once again, it's mainly on the bus. It's not so much action, but we're getting ready and we're getting in the footsteps of those 49ers. which is important. And so from day 2, we're getting into the action. So once the 49ers got to Boulogne in October 1915, they weren't going to stay in France. They were actually being sent right up to Flanders. That's where the Canadians were. And so we're going to go to where they had their first trench rotation at a place called Plug Street. And in fact, many of you might be familiar with the Christmas truce of 1914, where they had a famous soccer match between the Germans and the British. It's actually only about 200 yards away from where many of your relatives first went into the trenches. So we're going to see that. We're also going to move up to Kemmel, where the working parties that first winter, a very wet winter, happened. We'll be talking about the experiences of 49ers and different close calls, and also the death of Bobby Banks, who was on the 4th of November 1915. A bunch of men in C Company formed a circle, and they started singing. They didn't realize that a German sniper had them in the scopes. And so he fired, and one 49er fell, and it was Bobby Banks, who was the first man to be killed. So we'll be visiting his grave, as well as the other 2 who are buried at Kemmel Chateau Cemetery in Belgium. And once again, we're going to do a moment of silence in remembrance of him and the other 49ers that fell in those early days. Later on, we're going to be moving up to the Ypres salient, especially Sanctuary Wood. Now, the Ypres salient is world-renowned for being one of the most devastating battlefields of human history. And so for the 49ers, after they went through that breaking in period, just south of the Ypres salient, they get sent into Sanctuary Wood on the apex. What that means, if you can imagine a bulge in the line, they were more or less on the tip of the spear. And so they were surrounded. They were getting shot at by German artillery guns from the north, from the east, and from the south. It was a terrible, terrible position, but it was their homes for about 3 months. So we're going to be going to where they were in Sanctuary Wood. We're going to see where they had their first battle, the big charge in June of 1916. And then also we're going to be later on in that day, we're going to be seeing where they rested, because the typical trench rotation in the First World War, you're going to spend a week in the front line trenches. What you can see right here is we're going to visit that trench line. Then you're going to spend a week in the reserve line, doing working parties and so on and so forth. And then a week out on rest. So one of the places we'll visit is Talbot House in Popperingham, where many soldiers went to rest, because it was a house that had been bought by a British Army chaplain. And the whole idea was that once you get into that house, you lose your rank. And so, whether you're a colonel, a general, or a low-ranking private, you're on the same level. And they've now converted into a museum. And so we can hear the original piano from 1915 being played, just like your relatives would have heard back during the war 100 years ago. And it would go walk through the rooms and so on and so forth. We know the 49ers were there, and all sorts of them, because we have first-hand accounts from everywhere, from the colonel of the regiment, Colonel Griesbaugh, who was commanding the unit, all the way down to low-ranking privates visiting that place. So all that to be said, you will literally be walking the footsteps in the same rooms, on the same carpets, seeing the same wallpaper as your relatives, which is just going to be magical. Last but not least, we're also going to be exploring and staying in a very historic town called Ypres. And Ypres was famous all the way back about 800 years ago for the cloth trade. Very rich city. And then and so the buildings were very old, and then it was more or less shattered during the war. But it was a town very well known to any 49er that was there. And it's all been since rebuilt, but rebuilt beautifully. So it still feels very old. Some parts of it, such as the ramparts, are still original. And there's all these iconic photographs taken during the war, which we can recreate, which once again, it'll be fantastic. So anyway, just to move forward here, the next thing too is we're going to jump ahead of time. So where we would have ended up on day 2 was about July of 1916. Now we're going to move forward to the Battle of Passchendaele, starting July of 1917. Battle of Passchendaele is one of the most iconic battles of the First World War. If you've ever seen a muddy photo from World War I, odds are it was taken during the Battle of Passchendaele. What that summer in 1917 was, it was the wettest summer on record. And the British were going to launch a massive offensive to try and knock out German U-boat pens all the way up in a place called Bruges. Unfortunately, they never got there, but the artillery, the mass amount of artillery they used, not only did it destroy some of the German defenses, not all of them, but some of them, but also shattered all the drainage ditches across the Flemish countryside. And so what that meant was, with the torrential downpours that were happening, turned everything into quagmire mud. whole divisions, whole battalions got wiped out trying to advance through. The Germans were getting really good at defense, and so within months, it had broken down. The British Army, the Australians, the New Zealanders, the South Africans, and last but not least, in October 1917, to try and capture the Passchendaele Ridge, it was the Canadian Corps that got called forward. And so we're going to be following their road to Passchendaele. And for the 49th Battalion, who partakes in one of the attacks, it was their darkest hour. They lose almost 475 guys trying to advance about 300 yards. That's 475 men, and some of you will have relatives who were in that attack, where they're killed or wounded trying to advance only 300 yards. So it'll be quite something. And so to commemorate that battle, it'll be one of the sites that will be unveiling a monument that afternoon, and we'll culminate the day with doing the last post ceremony at Ypres. And so what you guys can see on the image on your right here, this is actually a ceremony that happens every night at 8 p.m. The walls of this memorial, it's now a gate, but you can see there's some etchings throughout. Those are all names. There's 50,000 names of soldiers that are still missing, and it includes about 350 names of 49ers that died in 1916 and 1917 in and around Ypres. And so it's a moving ceremony. We're going to have people placing wreaths in honor of the 49th Battalion that fought there in Flanders during the Great War. And we'll also be unpacking some of the stories, names, and really what's behind them. And for instance, there's 2 49ers on that memorial, which were both 16 when they were killed on the same day. And so we'll be understanding kind of the significance of what this actually meant. There's Edmonton Eskimos up on there. It's really quite incredible. But anyway, it'll be a fantastic day. We'll have the rest of the night to enjoy some local Belgian beer, if you so please, or some nice Belgian cuisine, if you'd rather, or have a nice evening. So, but it'll be a magical day, and it'll be a great team building event too, because we're going to be representing the 49th with that monument unveiling. So it'll be fantastic. So anyway, moving back once again in time, we deviated when we did day 3 at Passchendaele, just because we're in the same location. Passchendaele is just near Ypres. We're going to go back in time, back to the summer of 1916. So right after they did that charge in the Ypres salient, the 49th Battalion rebuild. There's new guys that come in, and then they get called to move down to the Somme. Now, still to this day, the 1916 Battle of the Somme is one of the bloodiest battles in human history. And the 49th Battalion gets sent in there, and they also partake in many of the attacks. And I don't quote me here, but I think they go down with about 700 guys. And by the time they come out with only about 200. So it's mass casualties. And they're fighting, really, it's a diversion. The French have another big battle happening in the south, and they're trying to draw up the German reserves, which they do. But it just becomes a big meat grinder. So what we're going to do, we're going to walk in their footsteps once again. So we're going to follow their long march to the Somme. They got off at a place called Contville. We're not going to go all that way back, but it's about 80 kilometers. They marched on foot in the hot summer sun to get to the Somme. We're also going to be visiting a place that it's not very well known now. It's called Nauer. And just outside of Nauer, there was the only suicide in the 49th Battalion took place there. So we'll be unpacking the story of Private Hines. It's not well known. It's not really in the regimental history or anything like that. But the reason why we're going there is because it was well known to the 49ers in 1916. If you had a relative who was on that march, every single one of them knew about this, and they talked about how sad the whole situation was. And so we're going to relive that. You're going to understand the 49th Battalion like how they understood it. When we get to the Somme, just to better understand the actual battle there, we're going to go to those tangible sites where the battlefield is preserved. There's a large mine crater. There's also original trenches. So we're going to walk through those before eventually transcending on Courcelette, where the big 49th battles happen. At Courcelette itself, in September 1916, Chip Kerr was awarded the Victoria Cross for gallantry when he single-handedly captured a 250-yard stretch of trench and over 60 prisoners. And we're going to be using first-hand accounts there to really piece it all together. Everything from there was a gentleman who was flying over at the time, and we have his first-hand account of actually watching Chip Kerr capture all those prisoners. He thought he was going to be killed at any moment. We have Major Harstone's battle map, who was commanding Chip Kerr's company, C Company, during the battle, showing where all the machine guns were, the exact trenches he went through, how much resistance was met. We have all the first-hand accounts of newspaper reporters interviewing Chip Kerr in hospital after. asking him what happened. And so from traverse to traverse in that trench, we can geolocate where those traverses are. We can figure out what he was actually facing. And so it'll just, once again, it'll be magical to understand and unpack what actually happened that day and how he won the Victoria Cross. Later on, the 49th got pulled out of that battle. A few more reinforcements came. They did another trench rotation at a place called Hessian Trench. They get pulled out again. Over there, they got rained on for 2 days straight. 50 guys were killed or wounded. And then eventually partake in this attack at a place called Regina Trench. And we'll go see where one of the worst battles fought, the most grueling, the only one in vain, because the 49th Battalion and the rest of the Canadians were repulsed that day on the 8th of October. For units such as D Company, which went in with 109 men, they came out with only 15. So according to Griesbaugh, who was commanding the 49th Battalion at the time, that was the lost company. He said they went over the crest of the hill and they were never seen again. But then we're going to unpack and see actually what happened to those men. And unfortunately, it was as dire as it sounds. So, but it'll be, once again, it'll be a moving day, an important day, and we're going to be picking up from where we left off. Perhaps even more important to the Somme for many of us as Canadians, we're going to be following the footsteps of 49ers from the Somme to the quiet sector of Vimy Ridge, because at the end of 1916, when the winter was starting to come in, that's what Vimy Ridge was. There wasn't much fighting happening. Vimy Ridge, it's not only a huge Canadian battlefield, it was a huge French battlefield. So we'll see some of the French battlefields in 1915. 100,000 Frenchmen were killed, wounded, or missing trying to capture Vimy Ridge and another ridge line. They captured the other ridgeline, but they never captured Vimy. And so later on that day, we're going to see how the Canadians, especially the 49th, did. The trench you can see right here, this is actually a trench which was cleared and helped. It was helped cleared by soldiers of the 49th Battalion. So part of our visit to Vimy Ridge, we're going to be doing a VIP tour of not only the Vimy trenches, but also the tunnel system, the Grange Tunnel, which was dug out by 49ers before the battle. And we're going to explore that and understand how that great victory at Vimy happened. Once again, we're going to be using first-hand accounts when we go there. So we'll really kind of get nitty-gritty down into understanding, not just saying, we're here at Vimy and this happened, the Canadians pushed there. We're going to say, in that traverse, this is what happened. That traverse, this is what happened. It'll be, once again, quite incredible, and we're going to be walking their footsteps. The other thing, too, which we're going to try and do, and it might be worthwhile just Google searching some images. You'll see Maison Blanche souterrain. Search that up. It's seldom open, but I have the contacts in the UK, so we're hoping they can come out to open it up exceptionally for our tour. It's a private cave, but it's the richest one of Canadian graffiti in the First World War. And so there's something like 1,000 pieces of Canadian graffiti, and some are real artworks, which are etched into the chalk. It's the same chalk belt you get for the White Cliffs of Dover. And so we're hopefully going to get down in there, but that's still to be confirmed. We'll also visit the places in Lens, the Avion Raid of June 1917, and we'll also see where the two 49ers, Private Peterson and Private Lawless, were found back in 2003 when they were digging up the pipeline. We'll also uncover how they were later identified. And then if we were following the 49th Battalion, they move up to Passchendaele at that point, and then they come down after. And then there's something called the German Spring Offensive that happened. In 1918, the Americans were starting to mobilize, and Russia had just left the war, leaving a bunch of free divisions for the Germans, and they realized they got to win the war in the West before it's too late. And so throughout the whole Western Front, they launch major attacks. They don't really hit the Canadian forces, but they hit the forces on the north and the south, and the position is quite precarious, but the Canadians hold on. But they're thinly stretched. They need all the guys they could get. And so for the 49ers, if you had a relative who's with the 49th Battalion in the spring of 1918, they spent 58 days straight in the trenches. And not only that, but the amount of guys they had in the trenches itself were few and far between. And so at every single morning, every single night when they were doing stand to and stand down and stand to and stand down, at any moment if the Germans attacked, they would have been overwhelmed and all killed. Yeah, they held on. It was a big bluff the 49th Battalion did. So we're going to show you guys how that actually did it. We're going to walk in their footsteps and see just how narrow it all was. And there's and just how brave they all were as well. After that time after that spring offensive, and they eventually get pulled back, they're going to go to a place called Fauquenem. And so we're going to follow in their footsteps. And that's where they did a lot of open warfare training with tanks and that sort of thing. 1918 is a big change because you go from, the stagnant trenches to the open warfare scene that is more typical with the Second World War. And it's in Fokenham that they're posted with French families, French local families, and they become quite close with them. And but once they finish their training, then they leave and they go off to fight, and they never return again. The village, and I've been there before, when you go to Fokenham, they have never met anyone from outside of France, and they've certainly never met a Canadian before. And they've never met any descendants of 49ers. And we have tons of evidence of the 49ers there. In fact, right behind the mayor's office, there's a school. And in that school, there used to be a photo studio back in 1918. And many 49ers, including many who might be listening to this video now, there's actually photos of your relative taken there. And so we're going to go retake some photos there. We're going to meet the local population. We're going to thank them. We're going to present a plaque to the mayor and reconnect rekindle that spirit, because for your relatives, they had a great relationship with people at town. And unfortunately, over 100 years, it's been lost, but we're going to rekindle that and probably thank them for all the great hospitality for our troops back in 1918. Last but not least, we're going to check out, right as we leave the next village over, there was a funny encounter between the Portuguese and the 49ers that ended up with the Portuguese shooting the 49ers, and the 49ers got away, but that's all good. But the bullet marks are still actually present in that village, which is quite amazing to see. What the 49ers were doing in Fokenham, and I think I mentioned it before, they were preparing for this big battle. In 1918, they're going to launch this massive offensive. It's going to be battle after battle, and it's going to start with the Battle of Amiens, and this is what wins the war. On the 8th of August, they go over the top, and they catch the Germans by surprise, and they advance nearly 10 kilometers. This is unheard of. The last battle the 49ers fought before this, they advanced 300 yards, and they had lost most of their battalion. Here, there are casualties, but they're nowhere near as heavy, and they advanced something like 4 kilometers. And so it's a huge, huge success. You can see in the photograph on our left, this is the family of Chester McGowan. I'll talk about him later, but it's on this field that he was awarded the military medal for bravery in the field. And it was just advancing up there. And so we, on our association tour, we unpacked that story, and that you can see the descendants of him back in that field all that time ago. Once again, you can see we're off the beaten path there. There's no paved road. It's virtually the same when they were there in 1918, except the grass was a bit higher and it was wheat at the time. Anyway, after that, the 49ers, they get pulled back, and then later on, they get sent in for a much different battle of Parvillers. And so we'll unpack that. For the family of Jim Crowley, who might be hearing me speak right now, we're going to go see where he was awarded the military medal for bravery. The same for if the Skitches are listening to this. The same can be said for that. Both were machine gunners in the same company, C Company. So I hope both of you guys come out and we can kind of explore and realize how similar your two stories are. And we'll also go into Bletcher Wood, which was captured by A Company, 49th Battalion, and C Company greatly assisted. And then Parvillers itself was captured by D Company, but we'll get into that when we get there. And it's the stories we're going to focus on first and foremost, and it's the stories of your relatives, which will make it fantastic. So now we are on day 7. So it went by quick, but we're already a week into the tour, and a magical tour it is. But we're turning all, after about a week in France, we can see we're turning French, and some of us might need more than a shower and maybe some change of clothes, and maybe some want to sleep in, a little rest. And so you're going to have the option to take the whole morning off and explore the city of Amiens. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. You can see the cathedral right here. This is always open, so you can go in and explore. It's just, it's fantastic. In the First World War, it was so close to the front lines. The French and Australian troops actually sandbagged virtually all the cathedral to protect it. And luckily they did, because it's, well, it's not literally a wonder of the world, but it is in my books. It's fantastic. There's also cafes nearby and laundromats. And once again, you can wash your clothes if you'd like, or if you'd rather, if you're ganky for it, if you're feeling it, you can join me and the bus driver, and we're going to be doing an optional historical tour around the area. So we might not just be hitting the First World War sites, for instance. We'll be hitting some of the other places of interest. So more information will be available during the tour for that as well. That afternoon, we're going to reconvene and meet up probably the hotel lobby, and all in our tour shirts and everything, because we're going to be returning to Corson. That's where we're going to unveil the memorial there. So we had already unveiled the memorial at Passchendaele on day 3, and then on day 7, that's where we're coming to Corson to unveil the memorial in France. We're going to have a reception at the mayor's office. We're going to meet the local population. Once again, it'll be fantastic. And we're hoping if you're part of the Kerr family here, we do hope you come out for Chip Kerr VC. And then also, I had mentioned before, but on the Vimy Day, I think that's day 5, we're going to be following Roland's story quite well in depth, and talking about like going to the actual part of No Man's Land he was killed at, and then also Fosse 10 Cemetery, of course, where he's now buried, and talking about Gerard Peterson, who's the Norwegian sailor who had risked his life to actually bring him in. Anyway, apologies for my rambling. Then we're going to come back to Amiens, and the way we're going to come back, we're actually going to pass through the 1918 crash site in April of 1918 of the Red Baron. It's right near an old brick kiln near Corby and in the Somme River Valley. And there's a connection also to Edmonton, which is quite neat. He was trying to shoot down an Edmonton pilot named Watt May, and then he was shot down by a mix of the Canadian pilot behind, and then also ground fire from the Australians. Anyway, but it's a story, a bit of a debate. We'll break it down when we get there, but it's all interesting stuff. Oh, I jumped ahead way too quick. And then after that, now we're on day 8, so we're reconvening. We're back in 1918, so we had our little day off, if you will, not totally, but a little bit. And this is going to be a busy day. So if you remember from the Battle of Amiens, it's a big offensive they launch. They're pushing and pushing. They keep pushing. And later on in August of 1918, after the Battle of Amiens and Parvillers, they're now capturing the first ever village single-handedly. It's called Pelves. And so we're going to go there and see where that happened. If you're the Shaw family listening to this, we're going to go exactly where Thomas Shaw was awarded the Military Medal for bravery for escorting his men forward, or his platoon forward, despite the machine gun fire. We're also, once again, going through Pelves, and we're going to see where all the heavy fighting took place and how they captured the village as well. It was brilliantly planned. Later on, we're going to keep going down the road, not too far away, and we're going to see the last big battle of the war. This is Cambrai, and so we're going to go to the jumping off lines. We're going to walk their footsteps through it, and especially we're going to go to this one road called the Douai Road. The 49ers had to push through this. There was trees along this road. It was quite open, and the Germans had ambushed it. They knew the 49ers had to come across this, and so they put machine guns all across the road. And in fact, further down the road, so the 49ers didn't realize they were there. But as soon as they came across, they came in the open, the machine guns started shooting. And normally machine guns aim low, kind of for the legs, but these ones aimed high. And one of the guys who was there in the family, I think, are joining us for the tour, is once again the Chester McGowan family. And for Chester McGowan, what had happened was him and his unit, he was a sergeant at the time, his section he was commanding, they had basically been wiped out to a man, so they were killed or wounded. He had been shot in the head, but luckily it was a grazing wound, but bleeding profusely nonetheless. And then moments later, the Germans launched a counterattack, recaptured that ground, and then there was a single German soldier who went around to his section and started bayoneting Canadian soldiers, 49ers, just executing them, because he was worried the resistance they might give up, shooting them in their back and that sort of thing. When he eventually came up to Chester McGowan, Chester was watching all this happening. Chester kept his eyes closed and I guess was praying to himself. And luckily, the German soldiers decided not to bayonet him, because just with all the blood coming down, and Chester actually survived the war. And he recounted this story to his family years later. It was during our last association tour that the family shared this story, and we were actually at the place that had happened. So these are the sorts of stories that you can expect to hear. And when we're doing this tour and we're talking about the 49th Battalion, it's through stories of the family members when we go to these places. That's what's going to make it so exceptional. And it's going to bring it all to life and make it all real. And once again, we're all going to be walking their footsteps together. Once we get to Cambrai, we're going to do a group toast. We'll do it in the town square there. which is just down the road. This is where these guys are marching. They're going to the town square. But this is October 1918. We're going to do it in August 2026, but it's better late than never. And then we'll do a toast to the battalion and toast to all your families, your relatives, for all we've done and seen so far. And before driving to the historic city of Mons, Belgium, which is where the war actually ended in November 11th, 1918. The 49th Battalion entered there 10:30 a.m. on the 11th of November. And so 30 minutes later, the armistice was sounded and the war ended. So once we get there, we're going to have an optional walking tour. So you guys are welcome to join me, and we'll go around and I'll have a lot of pictures so we can show you what it looked like at the time, where the soldiers were, and then the buildings are virtually unchanged. Once again, that's the end of the war. And so you would think that it's the end of the tour as well. But you might notice right now we're only on day overview number 8. And it's a 10-day tour, so there must be another day packed in, and you're exactly correct. And so, in fact, day number 9, much like what the 49ers thought, they thought, okay, won the war, time to go home, especially Spanish flu was coming around. We gotta get the heck out of here. Didn't happen. And so they actually marched all the way to Brussels. And so that's going to be our last full day together. And so we're gonna follow their footsteps. Interestingly as well, for the 49th Battalion, they actually covered the Battle of Waterloo. That was part of their syllabus training. And so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to walk in their footsteps, and the footsteps of perhaps some of their forefathers who fought 100 years before they did at the battles of Waterloo. And then we're also going to see some of the billeting places, such as the Chateau d'Argenteuil, which was once the Billets for Sea Company, and it's a beautiful chateau now. And that's where they had their last Christmas of the war. And then we're gonna stay overnight in Brussels. We're gonna have our last award ceremony, because our last dinner together, and you'll also have an optional visit to come to the what's actually one of the best military museums in the world, the Belgian Royal Military Museum. And there's a fantastic First and Second World War section, even better aviation section, but that's optional. Or you can explore Brussels. It's a beautiful place. It's the capital of Belgium. There's, if you're a beer person, there's great beer there as well, of course. And if you're more of a chocolate person, Belgium is more famous for their chocolate and their beer, so even better. So it'll be great, and I can suggest things. So I actually did my high school in Brussels, so it's I know it like a local. And this is the Grand Place. This is the central there. Anyway, the following day, that's our last day, so it's a transfer to where we started the tour, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. From there, it's really easy to get around, either through a flight. We're going to be in the EU, so you don't have to pass through passport security or anything like that, for flights, or also for a train. You can get to downtown Amsterdam in 10 minutes. I can help with that. That's not an issue. And then equally, you can also once you're in Amsterdam, there's also some of the Thalys lines, which I guess they changed it to Eurostar now, which go direct across not only continental Europe, but you can also get to the UK. So when we're so close there, there's don't hesitate, keep traveling. I can help with any bookings, so just let me know when we'll get to that a bit later. But I can also help with post and pre-tour accommodation as well. So, and that'll be our end of our tour. So it should be a really awesome, comprehensive tour. It's going to be so special, not necessarily for the places we're going, but it's not only that, but it's people we're traveling with. You know, each and every one of you are going to make it just exceptional. And so melding the stories and realizing how connected we all are, that's what's going to be so special about this tour. So just a couple things to kind of go through. More formalities over anything, just kind of what to expect. The photograph on the left, this is what's known as a UXO. So this is unexploded ordnance. The millions and millions of artillery shells that were fired, 30% never blew up upon impact. And so what that means is there's still quite a few of them out there. In fact, it's just a crazy statistic. France alone recovers 350 tons of unexploded ordnance, unexploded artillery shells, grenades, gas shells, everything like that. Every year, 350 tons, that's about 1 ton a day. And so it's almost inevitable that we're going to see some of these. So it's important that when we do, and I'll identify it for you, you can take photos, you can look, but we're not going to touch them. We're definitely not going to bring them home. Because as cool as a souvenir from the war might be, there's other souvenirs to find. We'll have ample opportunity. And a live shell might not be the best idea. So The other thing too, we're going to be traveling in August, but still there could be hot weather, it could be rainy. So bring a rain jacket. If not, you might jinx it, and then we get rainy weather the whole way. But it's okay. It's more immersive, right? For a battlefield tour. The other thing too, if we do have really hot weather, we're going to have sunscreen on the bus, and then we're also going to have bottled water available on the bus as well. So at all times, it's going to be refrigerated. So that'll be available to you. The bus, once again, it's great. Reclining seats, there's TV system, washrooms on board as well. And once again, we'll have refrigerated water. So we should be good. And importantly, air conditioning as well. And last but not least, of course, unexploded ordnance. But as I mentioned, really, it's not that big of a hazard. It's luckily in the First World War, there's no landmines. And so you won't really accidentally step somewhere where you weren't meant to step. But anyway, it's just something they live with now on the Western Front. So just kind of quickly go over here too. What's included? You're gonna, as mentioned before, you have the luxury coach travel with the washrooms, which I guess we just covered a little bit. You also have the 9-night hotel accommodation, and this is going to include also the morning breakfast, and you can see that in the next slide. When I send out you'll notice I'll send out a form, and we'll get into it a bit later on November 1st. I'm going to need to know if you're traveling in a couple or with a roommate, or if you want the single supplement, and then that'll dictate what type of bed arrangement you'll have. The other important aspect as well is air conditioning doesn't typically run in. They don't typically have it in Europe, but there's a select type of hotels that do. And so I'm working hard to get us booked into those hotels in particular. And so that even if it is really hot temperatures, we can still have good night's sleeps every night. So we'll work on that. Once again, with meals, daily breakfast, and then you check your brochure and it'll have information on the select meals. Just for clarification as well, it's the 49th Battalion tour. It's not the Liberation tours. And so they have a longer itinerary than us. You'll also have you'll also get a pre-tour and a post-tour booklet. So the pre-tour booklet's your battle map. So when we go to these places, you can have the references. Your post-tour booklet is a photo book. Just so it's a memory book, captions of what we did every day, and photos from the actual tour of us at the different places. And so that you know that, okay, this is where I was, this is what we did, and for future references. It'll also help explain your relative's war service, because we'll go into that as well. Last but not least, you'll get tour shirts and also flags, and these flags you can place on the graves of 49ers when we go there to the different cemeteries. So importantly too, what's not included, once again, all this is covered in the brochure. Important, do get a travel insurance. You get trip cancellation. There's a lot available in the market. Manulife, I think, gives quotes, as well as I'm sure AMA and so on and so forth. You also have airfares not included, and also passport fees. Importantly, with passport, make sure that your passport doesn't expire within 6 months of the end of the tour, or when you plan to return to Canada or wherever that may be. With airfare as well, if you need help booking, I'm more than happy to give you a quote, and then I could book on your behalf. You'll get more information about that on the 1st of November, and then we'll get into that a bit later. The other thing too, once again, with KLM, you can see the airplane there. They have a lot of direct flights to Amsterdam direct, which is excellent. So it might be of interest, and all throughout Canada. The other thing too is pre and post tour travel expenses, but once again, similar with the airfares, I can help book that and plan that for you if you'd so desire. So that's whether it's travel or also accommodation in Amsterdam. Now, importantly too, I want to talk about the cost. And so just for clarification, I'd sent in a previous email about Liberation tours. The main thing I was highlighting is that we're trying to keep the cost as low as possible. If you look at different tour providers currently on the market, Liberation Tours is virtually the only Canadian bus operating tour that exists at the moment. They're charging $7,825. It's Canadian focused, but it includes both world wars, and it's a bit longer. But the amount of depth that we're going into, it's unparalleled. And similarly, there's an Australian focus tour, which is 7 days. And it's even more than what we're doing in 10 days. And so all that to be said, we're gonna see more, do more, and we're keeping the fees low. And the reason for that, we're really trying to get as many families to come out as possible. So the more the merrier, and especially just to not only for the memorials and unveiling that, but just for you to understand their war. You know, the amount they sacrificed, the amount they did. It's so important for you to understand not only their war, but also your heritage once again. And I think it will surprise many of you. And the main thing is just simply getting out there. So, so what's next? The next steps. I alluded to this earlier, but on November 1st, I'll be sending out sign up emails. So depending on when you're hearing this, this will be either this Saturday or perhaps last Saturday. I think most of you I have on the email list. If not, you'll see my email at the end. Just shoot me at the end of the presentation. Just shoot me an email, and I'll add you onto the list right away. The other thing too is you'll get the booking information, and it'll be first come first serve. There's only 30 seats available, so please be quick with I guess I don't expect it to be a problem unless if there's a big contingent from a particular family who wants to come out. In that case, just reach out to me directly, and for instance, if there's 10 or more. Because what we might look at doing, and I'd alluded to it at the bottom here, is doing a possible tour earlier on in August. And we could even straddle some of the memorial unveilings. We have official ones on each, but we do ceremonies for both on both tours. But once again, it would be fantastic. The more, the better to get out here. There will also be other opportunities in the future, for instance, next year, to do similar tours. But what we're trying to do right now is, once again, the first in history, first in 90 years. So that's quite significant. So once again, 1936, 2026, it's about time. But anyway, so that's more or less what to expect. It's going to be, once again, a magical tour. It's going to be really quite exceptional, and there's nothing else like it on the happening these days. And we're more than excited to have each and every one of you on the tour. So. But do let me know if you have a family perhaps wanting to come out and there's more than 10. Just shoot me an email ahead, and then we can look at perhaps even launching another tour. Because the other thing too, the reason for the 30-seat cap is we want to make sure we're still being able to do all the amazing stuff we want to do. Once you get too many people on one tour, it becomes a bit too commercialized, one could say. And it limits what we're able to do. So we can't go to certain restaurants, we can't go to certain museums, we move a bit slower, we can't do as much. And so once again, we're trying to get as good of an experience for everyone, and really make it a once in a lifetime trip. So anyway, so that's where we're at right now. And I more than look forward to hearing from each and every one of you come November 1st. And I do hope at least most of you come on the story. Once again, it'll be quite something. The deposit schedule that what we're doing, you don't have to pay all at one time. So to secure your booking, once that email goes out, it'll be a $750 deposit. You can pay either cash, check, e-transfer. We can work out different payment methods. Subsequently, in the new year, there'll be payment installments once a month at $1,000 until April. At that point, it's just paying off the balance, which is $500. So it should be a schedule that works. You can also pay all up at front at once if you'd prefer, but it's whatever works for you. But these are the different deadlines that we're looking at. The reason for these installments is to secure the bookings for the hotels and the bus and so on and so forth, just so that's all ready for us to go once August comes around. So anyway, that's more or less kind of what we're trying to do. So once again, I just want to recap here and reiterate that this is going to be a once in a lifetime trip for each and every one of you. It's so special what we're going to do. And for me, it's a personal dream of mine to have the families, the 49ers, actually coming out, reliving and rewalking in these footsteps, on these important battlegrounds. So, and it'll be magical. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to leave it at that. So if you have any questions, you can see all my information on the bottom left here. You got my phone number and also my WhatsApp number and my email. Seriously, any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to reach out. If you wanted to join on the tour for only a few days, for instance, we could probably make some provisions there as well. But just reach out once again. So I'm just thinking about other common questions, and none really come to mind. But anyway, so I wish you all a very good evening or good morning, whenever you might be listening to this. And I hope for my own sake that this properly recorded this time. So that would be good. Anyway, you guys all take it easy, and thank you so much again for your interest. And I'm genuinely and sincerely excited for this trip coming up in August. Any questions, do not hesitate, and I'll be there to answer them. I wish you guys all the best, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.